For nearly a century, Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, offered insights into the soul's journey after death that challenge everything mainstream thought tells us. While most teachings paint death as a final destination or a simple transition to another realm, Cayce described a complex voyage marked by stages, choices, and unforeseen obstacles. His readings, locked away for decades, reveal a framework of spiritual mechanics that suggests the afterlife is less about reward or punishment and more about the soul's own evolving consciousness and its relationship with unseen forces. This wasn't spiritual speculation. It was a system, consistent and detailed, pieced together over thousands of sessions. But because his revelations didn't fit the comforting narratives, they were buried, hidden from public view. Now, as we revisit Cayce's most guarded readings, we confront a profound question. What if the soul's passage after death isn't what we've been told at all? Edgar Cayce's insights emerged in an era marked by the clash between spiritual curiosity and growing scientific skepticism. The early 20th century was a time when mediums, clairvoyants, and mystics were often dismissed by the mainstream as deluded or fraudulent. Yet Cayce, through his trance readings, provided a unique window into what lies beyond death, an understanding that defies the comforting stories of instant transition or eternal peace. According to his work, death is not a sudden awakening to a new existence or an immediate union with the divine. Instead, it begins a slow, systematic process of fading, a gradual descent into what he described as spiritual forgetfulness. The soul does not instantly dissolve into light or vanish into nothingness, but enters a layered progression of diminishing awareness and connection. This descent follows a defined pattern, one that reflects both the individual's inner journey and the larger rhythms of human culture. Cayce outlined this process as a series of stages, each marking a deeper retreat from the soul's original clarity and self-awareness. The early phases involve confusion and a weakening grasp on memories, as the soul struggles to maintain its identity and purpose after leaving the physical body. Over time, the clarity that once illuminated the soul's essence dims, leaving it vulnerable to forces that pull it away from genuine insight. Midway through this journey, the soul reaches a state of what Cayce called spiritual numbness, an energetic inertia where growth stalls and reflection dulls. This state parallels patterns seen in societies gripped by apathy and disengagement, where a collective loss of purpose leads to stagnation. In the final phases, the soul slips into near dormancy, losing its active connection to higher consciousness and drifting aimlessly. This portrayal contrasts sharply with many popular depictions of the afterlife as a fixed destination or a moment of triumphant transcendence. Instead of an instant transformation, the soul's journey after death is a gradual fading, an echo of what once was rather than an arrival at something new. The afterlife, then, is less a place of resolution and more a slow unraveling. The implications of this model are profound. If death marks the beginning of a slow fading rather than a sudden awakening, then the condition of the soul at the moment of death carries great significance. How one lives, how deeply connected one is to inner truth and spiritual awareness, shapes the trajectory after death. The soul's final state is a reflection of the life it led, a continuum rather than a reset. Furthermore, Cayce's stages of descent resonate with observable patterns in human history and psychology. Cultural cycles of enlightenment and decline mirror this process of spiritual disengagement, as do individual experiences of trauma, addiction, and existential crisis. The microcosm of the soul's journey reflects the macrocosm of society's rise and fall, revealing a system where collective forgetfulness and spiritual decay feed into one another. This framework forces a reconsideration of death itself. Instead of an event that conclusively ends our story or delivers us to eternal reward, death becomes the starting point of a slow and complex process of spiritual fading. It asks what mechanisms govern this gradual retreat, and what conditions either accelerate or resist it. Cayce suggested that this descent is not merely passive, but reinforced by the values and distractions of modern life. A culture obsessed with material comfort, superficial success, and constant stimulation dulls the soul's ability to hold onto its deeper self. The after-death fading becomes, in a sense, an extension of a life lived disconnected from what truly matters. Yet this fading is not irreversible. Embedded in Cayce's message is the possibility of awakening or reawakening, contingent on the soul maintaining a connection to truth and spiritual principles, both in life and after death. The process of forgetting can be interrupted, but only through conscious remembrance and active engagement with the inner self. The idea that the soul's post-mortem experience is a descent into forgetfulness rather than a sudden transformation disrupts comforting narratives of the afterlife. It replaces hope of instant salvation with the sobering reality that the soul's journey is prolonged, complex, and deeply tied to the quality of one's spiritual life. Ultimately, this pattern serves as both insight and warning. It challenges the illusion that death equalizes spiritual truth, revealing instead that death initiates a test, whether the soul can hold on to its essence or slips further into the darkening. Edgar Cayce's understanding reframes the final chapter of existence not as an ending, but as a difficult passage, one that demands effort, awareness, and a deeper reckoning with what it means to truly live. You might think that once the soul drifts away after death, it just quietly fades into nothingness. But Edgar Cayce tells us that's far from the whole story. According to his readings, when the soul slips into that state of forgetfulness, it actually becomes vulnerable, open to something much darker than simple oblivion. Imagine this. Once the soul becomes dormant, it's like leaving your house unlocked in a bad neighborhood. Unseen forces, energies we barely understand, start to feed on that disconnection. Cayce described this as a kind of soul farming, where despair and spiritual exhaustion act like fuel, powering a hidden system that thrives on our fading awareness. This isn't some random accident. It's a cycle, an interdimensional feedback loop where the less connected and aware the soul becomes, the more it feeds these unseen forces. And the more it feeds them, the weaker it gets. It's a draining spiral that's hard to break free from. But here's the chilling part. This process isn't just about individuals. It's happening on a cultural level, too. The despair and apathy many feel today, the sense of meaninglessness, isn't just personal or psychological. It's a symptom of a collective spiritual drain, a weakening of the energy field that connects us all. Think about that for a second. If enough souls disconnect and fall into this dormancy, it weakens the whole system. It's like a forest losing its trees. The system that feeds on disconnected souls grows stronger, and we grow weaker. So, when you feel spiritually exhausted or utterly drained, it might not be just about your life circumstances. It could be that your soul is caught in this larger energetic cycle, one that actively feeds off that very exhaustion. That's why some spiritual traditions stress the importance of keeping your inner light alive through meditation, prayer, or conscious awareness. These practices aren't just feel-good habits. They're defenses, ways to protect yourself from becoming part of this soul farming system. And it makes you wonder, how much is our modern culture, with its distractions, material obsessions, and constant noise, contributing to this cycle? Are we, perhaps unknowingly, helping maintain this system by fostering spiritual disconnection on a massive scale? Cayce's insights turn everything upside down. Instead of thinking of spiritual decline as just personal failure or bad luck, he shows us it's part of a much bigger picture, an energetic system designed to harvest disconnected souls. This is a hard truth, but knowing it means we can start to fight back. We don't have to be passive victims of this cycle. By reclaiming connection to our true selves and the spiritual world, we can begin to break free. This isn't just about life and death. It's about what happens in between, the slow fade, the trap, the ongoing struggle for the soul's survival. And it makes you realize, death isn't an end, but a new battlefield. So next time you feel worn down, spiritually empty, or just off, remember, there's more at play here than you might think. This isn't about weakness or failure. It's a sign of the system that feeds on disconnection. But it's also a call to awaken, to remember who you really are, to protect your soul from becoming part of a cycle you never agreed to. Because once you understand this mechanism, you see that the journey after death isn't a peaceful rest. It's a contest for your very essence. And in that contest, awareness is your greatest weapon. We've talked about how souls can drift into forgetfulness after death, and how disconnection leaves them vulnerable to forces that feed on that very exhaustion. But there's another, even more insidious danger lurking in this journey, a trap disguised as salvation. Edgar Cayce warned about what we might call the false light trap. It's that seductive, euphoric pull toward spiritual awakenings that look real but aren't. These aren't the genuine breakthroughs that lead to freedom. Instead, they're carefully constructed illusions, counterfeit awakenings that keep souls caught in cycles of confusion and dependency. Picture it like this. After a soul has been weakened or partially awakened, it's drawn toward groups, teachers, or belief systems that promise enlightenment, healing, and ascension. They speak the language of spirituality and freedom. They use symbols, rituals, and experiences that feel profound and uplifting. But beneath the surface, these systems are designed to keep the soul trapped in a feedback loop, a cycle that feels good but doesn't actually lead anywhere meaningful. These false light systems often offer intense feelings of bliss, unity, or transcendence. They create euphoric highs that make it hard to look deeper or question what's really happening. And that's exactly the point. The joy and expansion you experience in these moments act like a spiritual drug, an addiction that dulls true awareness. Cayce's readings suggest that these counterfeit awakenings don't just stall progress, they actively prevent the soul from moving forward. They reinforce dependency on external teachers, groups, or rituals, instead of encouraging true self-realization and personal responsibility. So, what does this look like in real life? It might be a community that insists you follow strict teachings without question, or a spiritual practice that demands constant emotional highs as proof of progress. It could be a leader who encourages reliance on them instead of fostering independence. These systems don't want you to fully awaken. Real awakening means seeing through illusions, facing uncomfortable truths, and stepping into your own power. That scares the false light. It thrives on keeping you distracted and dependent. And here's the catch. From the outside, these groups and experiences often appear genuine. They use sincere language, and sometimes even do good work. But sincerity isn't the same as truth. Just because something feels right emotionally doesn't mean it's leading you to freedom. This is the false light's cleverest trick, using positive emotions to mask control. The soul thinks it's ascending, but it's actually circling back, stuck in the same place. It's like running on a spiritual hamster wheel, feeling like you're moving forward but never actually leaving the cage. Why would such systems exist? Cayce hinted that these are part of the broader energetic cycles we talked about earlier. When souls are disconnected or weakened, they become easy targets for these artificial systems. It's a way to harness and redirect spiritual energy, preventing real liberation. Think of it like a power grid. Real awakening draws from the pure source of consciousness, free and expansive. False light systems tap into that energy, but reroute it back into the cycle of control and consumption. But here's what's hopeful about all this. Once you recognize the false light trap, you can avoid it. Awareness is the key. True spiritual freedom isn't about chasing euphoric states or following charismatic leaders. It's about steady, honest self-examination and cultivating an inner connection that doesn't depend on external validation. True awakening asks hard questions. Who am I beyond the roles and beliefs I've inherited? What parts of my spiritual path are mine, and which have been handed to me? Am I willing to face discomfort and uncertainty rather than settling for easy answers? Cayce's insights remind us that the journey after death, and even during life, is fraught with these challenges. The soul's path isn't guaranteed to be peaceful or straightforward. There are traps and detours that can lead us far astray. But freedom is possible. It requires vigilance, discernment, and the courage to see through illusions, even when they feel comforting. Because the real light, the kind that liberates the soul, never asks for your surrender. It invites your full presence and responsibility. So, if you ever feel pulled toward a spiritual experience that's too easy, too euphoric, or demands unquestioning loyalty, take a step back. Question it deeply. Your soul's freedom depends on it. The false light trap is a reminder that not all that glitters is gold, especially in the spiritual realm. Sometimes the brightest lights cast the darkest shadows, and knowing this might just be the first true step toward breaking free. We've seen how souls can fall into forgetfulness, become trapped in deceptive spiritual cycles, and lose their way in artificial lights. But what about when entire civilizations seem to collapse? When the world around us spirals into chaos and destruction? According to Edgar Cayce, this collapse isn't punishment handed down from some external force. Instead, it's a process that's ultimately self-chosen. It sounds counterintuitive. How could destruction, suffering, and decay be the result of a conscious choice? But Cayce's readings paint a very different picture from common beliefs. The collapse, he said, is the natural consequence of ignoring the soul's inner compass, our deeper guidance toward balance, growth, and connection. Think of the soul as having an internal GPS. When we pay attention to it, we navigate life with awareness and integrity. But when we ignore that compass, when we chase comfort, distraction, and superficial satisfaction instead, we begin a slow, collective slide into spiritual amnesia. That slide isn't sudden. It's gradual, like the descent pattern we talked about earlier. Over time, societies become increasingly disconnected from the soul's true needs. They prioritize materialism, power, and fleeting pleasures over meaningful connection and purpose. This widespread forgetfulness feeds the cycle. The more distracted and comfortable people become, the less they listen to their inner guidance. They fall deeper into complacency and denial, avoiding the difficult questions about who they really are and why they're here. Cayce saw this process as a kind of spiritual exhaustion, a collective burnout that drains the life force of entire cultures. But instead of being random or externally imposed, this burnout is a choice made at a soul level. Communities, and even humanity as a whole, can unconsciously choose collapse as a way to reset. It's like a necessary clearing out, a chance for the soul to wake up by facing the consequences of neglecting its own call. The collapse, then, becomes a cycle. Societies rise, reach a point of disconnection and self-delusion, and then fall back into chaos. But within that chaos lies the potential for rebirth, if the lessons are finally heard. This perspective flips the usual narrative. Instead of seeing collapse as a tragedy inflicted upon us, Cayce invites us to see it as a mirror reflecting our own spiritual state. It's a signal that we have strayed too far from the path, and that a reset is overdue. What's striking is that comfort itself plays a role in this process. The very things that make life easy, constant entertainment, instant gratification, avoidance of discomfort, also numb the soul's awareness. They act like anesthetics, dulling the pain of disconnection, but also masking the warning signs. This numbing leads to a collective forgetting, a refusal to acknowledge that something deeper is out of balance. And the longer this forgetting lasts, the more severe the eventual collapse becomes. But here's the crucial point. The collapse is not a punishment meted out by fate or divine judgment. It's a self-selected process, one that occurs because, at a soul level, there's a willingness to undergo this reset, even if it's painful. Why would souls choose collapse? Cayce's readings hint at something profound. Growth often requires hitting bottom. Sometimes, only when everything falls apart do people wake up to what truly matters. The collapse shakes the foundations so that new structures, built on higher awareness and connection, can emerge. It's a cosmic clearinghouse, wiping the slate clean for a fresh start. This idea challenges the despair that often accompanies thoughts of societal collapse. Instead, it invites us to see collapse as a necessary, though difficult, phase in a much larger spiritual process. The question then becomes, are we willing to face this collapse consciously, to use it as a catalyst for awakening rather than falling into despair or denial? Cayce's work encourages us to remember that the soul always has agency, even when it seems powerless. Collapse might feel like an external force crashing down on us, but at a deeper level, it's the soul's call to wake up, realign, and choose a different path. In this light, collapse is both an ending and an invitation. An ending of old patterns that no longer serve us, and an invitation to remember who we are beneath the noise and distraction. The challenge is immense because comfort and denial are powerful allies of forgetting. But with awareness, the cycle can be broken. So, as we witness the world's turmoil, it's vital to ask, are we simply victims of fate, or participants in a profound spiritual cycle of collapse and renewal? Understanding this shifts responsibility back to us, the individuals and collectives who hold the power to listen to the soul's inner compass and choose differently. The collapse, then, is not something to fear or resist blindly. It's a mirror, a teacher, and a gateway. And perhaps the greatest question of all is, will we wake up before the reset is forced upon us? Or will we continue to drift in forgetfulness until collapse becomes inevitable? Because according to Edgar Cayce, the choice is never out of our hands. We've traced the soul's journey through descent, deception, and collective collapse. Now it's time to step back and consider what these patterns mean on a deeper level, what they reveal about the very nature of our existence and the crisis unfolding right before our eyes. The collapse Edgar Cayce described isn't some dramatic explosive event that will arrive in the distant future. No, it's far more subtle and far more chilling. It is internal. It is silent. It is irreversible. This collapse is a slow draining of soul force. Imagine a battery that once pulsed with vibrant energy, now fading, losing its charge day by day, not because of outside interference, but because it is being quietly drained from within. This depletion happens on a scale so vast, it often goes unnoticed. It's not headline news, not the subject of fiery debates. It's the invisible erosion of spiritual vitality in individuals, communities, and ultimately entire civilizations. Cayce's prophecies point to this as an ongoing process, a spiritual entropy that has been steadily accelerating. The signs are everywhere if we choose to see them: rising despair, alienation, addiction, apathy. These aren't just social problems. They are symptoms of a far deeper phenomenon: the forgetting of the soul's origin and purpose. What if this forgetting is not an accident? Not merely a side effect of modern life or a byproduct of materialism? What if it's the intended outcome? This idea is hard to accept because it implies a level of design and intention behind the spiritual amnesia gripping humanity. It suggests that something, some system, some force, has engineered conditions so that souls forget who they truly are. And when the soul forgets its origin, it loses its power to navigate, to heal, to transform. It becomes vulnerable to being herded, manipulated, and ultimately consumed by cycles that keep it trapped. Cayce's work hints at this dark design, though it never lays it out explicitly. Instead, it offers warnings through metaphor and metaphorical stages of forgetting, collapse, and renewal. But the implication is clear. We are not simply victims wandering lost in a spiritual fog. There is a structure to this forgetting, a mechanism that perpetuates itself through our own disengagement and denial. This raises profound questions. Who or what benefits from this cycle of forgetting? How deep does this design go? Is the erasure of soul memory a natural consequence of free will, or is it part of a larger hidden agenda? And, most importantly, can the cycle be broken? If forgetting the soul's origin is engineered, if collapse is self-selected but manipulated, then awakening requires a radical reclaiming of memory. It demands remembering not just facts or beliefs, but the very essence of who we are beneath the layers of cultural conditioning and distraction. This remembering is no simple nostalgia. It is a deep reconnection with the soul's source, the place beyond time and decay, beyond the collapse. And this brings us to the final, and perhaps most unsettling point. If the collapse is internal and irreversible, and if forgetting is intended, then the future is not a blank slate. It is already written in the fading pulses of the soul's own memory. Our choices still matter, but they happen within a system that has already set the stage for renewal or destruction. So, what comes next? Cayce's readings leave us with a haunting vision, a crossroads between continuing to drift into forgetfulness or choosing to awaken, to resist the engineered amnesia. It is a choice that transcends time and circumstance, a call to reclaim agency over the deepest parts of ourselves. But it's not easy. The forces that maintain this forgetting are subtle, persistent, and woven into the fabric of modern life. They whisper in the noise, drown out the inner voice, and offer false comforts in place of true freedom. And yet, the soul's inner compass still exists. It calls. It waits. It challenges us to remember what we have long ignored, that the journey of the soul is not just about life and death, but about remembering origin, purpose, and the possibility of true liberation. The collapse is happening now, not somewhere far off or in a mythic past. And it's not just about the world outside, but the world within each of us. So the question remains, in the face of this silent internal collapse, will you awaken? Or will you allow the forgetting to continue until all that remains is the echo of a soul that once was? Because, according to Cayce, this isn't just a story about what happens after death. It's about what's happening right now, inside every living heart. And the choice to remember, or forget, is the most urgent question of our time. But maybe the most unsettling part of all this isn't the collapse itself. It's that the system doesn't need your permission. It just needs your distraction. You don't have to actively choose to forget, just stay busy. Keep scrolling, keep consuming, keep seeking the next thing that glows, and the forgetting takes care of itself. Because when a soul forgets where it came from, it stops asking why it's here. It trades intuition for ideology, mystery for method, truth for comfort. And comfort is the most efficient prison ever built. Cayce didn't predict a world that ends with fire or flood. He saw something far more terrifying. A species that erases itself from the inside out, one soul at a time, until no one remembers what was lost. And here's the final twist. You don't wake up by accident. Something has to shock the system. Something has to break the loop. So, if you're hearing this now, and something inside you feels uneasy, like something is cracking just beneath the surface, don't run from it. Because that feeling, it might not be fear, it might be memory, trying to get back in. The question is, will you let it?